Stalked by a weird man. First of all, English isn't my first language. I'm sorry if everything isn't 100% clear. This story takes place a few years ago while I was still with my ex-GF. I am 22, was 17 to 18 at this moment. I was living with my parents and we lived in a little town of 300 people. It's literally the campaign with 3 farms in this town, which includes lots of fields. We had the habits of walking in those fields thanks to a little path which is really old. There's place for only one car/truck/tractor. It was an afternoon, 5/6 p.m., and we decided to eat some stuff into a field near the road. So we can see the road and people on the road can see us. The field, which belongs to my neighbor, who are okay with the fact that we're here, is separated from the road thanks to barbed wire. It's a few miles from my parents' house. We smoke weed, we drink, we eat, we listen to music, everything is alright. However, at one point, a car parked on the middle of the road and a guy went out of his car and is doing stuff on the bushes. At this point, I'm thinking, okay, the dude is just picking stuff like nuts or whatever because it's the end of the summer. But I keep an eye on him. I talk with my GF just like I did all afternoon until then, and I looked back at him. The guy is standing still, behind his car, and he's looking right at us. Motionless. I don't say anything, and looked back at my GF. I give another look 30 seconds to 1 minute later. The guy has moved, he's now at the other side of his car, and same thing. No motion. Just looking at us. The same process is about to be repeated 2 more times, with him at different location around his car. I have chills, and thinking this situation isn't normal at all. The guy suddenly went back into his car and moved away. At this moment, I told to my GF, pick your things, we're moving. She thinks I'm kinda overreacting, thinking I'm paranoid because of the weed we smoked, but she listens to me. We're back on the road, going the other way the guy went. The road is a circle, every way leads back to my house, and guess who has turned around and is coming right bang us with his car? This guy. Still looking at us while driving, he keeps his road, and turns around, once again, to keep staring at us. This process repeats 2 times. At this moment, my GF told me I was right. So we took his plate, and tried to call my parents. No one is answering. The last time the guy passed at our level, I can clearly see something on his passenger seat, but what? But, my neighbor came right behind him with his truck. I stopped my neighbor, and told her what we just witnessed. She get us in the truck, we went back to my parents' home. My dad is a cop. I told him the plate, he looked at it. The car belonged to a grandma and was stolen. End of this part of the story. Few weeks later. As every day, I go take my bus in the next town, which is 7 minutes of bike. It was still dark because it's pretty early in the morning. When I left my parents' home on my biker, I noticed light behind me. It was his car. I don't know how he knew I was there. Maybe it's pure bad luck from me, but I'm 100% sure it was his car. He followed me until I took a path which a car can't use, only bikes and pedestrians can take. I turned off my light and drove until I went to my bus in the complete dark, in order to not be seen by this guy. I kept using this way for the next 2 years, and I've never met him again. To the guy who stole a grandma's car, and stalked me and my GF, let's not meet again. Stalked through a park at midnight in Vietnam. So I'm currently traveling SEA with my 2 brothers. We just arrived in Saigon this morning. In the evening after dinner and few beer, me and my 2 brothers, older and younger, I am the middle brother, decided to sit on a bench in Howden Park, and have a quick smoke. We were chatting away, sat on the bench when I noticed a Vietnamese man, repeatedly looking at us and walking in circles very near where we were sitting. At first I wasn't too concerned about him, however my spider senses were alerted. Then a minute or 2 later I notice another Vietnamese man dressed as a Grab delivery driver acting suspicious and repeatedly looking at me and my brothers. The stalkers were both on the phone and I believe they were communicating with each other. Being in a foreign country, my youngest brother told us to leave. However, it was a good 600 walk to the park exit. As we were walking, I noticed both Vietnamese men had got on mopeds and were following us through the park, stopping behind trees and watching us. They overtook us and sat at a bench further down the path waiting for us to cross their path. Being aware of this, We left the path and started walking on the grass, as the crow flies to the nearest exit. Avoiding the men, we are 100 meters from the exit when my younger brother looks behind us to see one of the men sprinting towards us. My younger bro took a fighting stance, standing his ground the men and asked what he wanted. The man's posture became very small and he began talking very quietly. Both me and my younger brother kept a good distance and told him to leave us alone as we walked backwards towards the exit, noticing the second assailant also approaching us wearing motorcycle gear. However, my oldest brother decided instead of trying to get out of the situation, he got closer to the whispering Vietnamese man to hear what he was saying. Both me and my younger brother were yelling at him to get the fuck out of heat, but he was being a dumbass. He was being groomed. It took the Vietnamese guy 5 seconds to win my brother's trust. Then out of nowhere, when my older bro was leaning in very close trying to hear the men, the Vietnamese guy grabbed my brother's crotch, grabbed his dong. He was shocked. I was ready to fight, expecting to be robbed or something, but the dong grab was super unexpected. After that we started shouting and the men fled. For context, both me and my younger brother are competing MMA fighters. I posted one of my fights on Reddit if you don't believe me. However, the whole situation was unexpected. We didn't engage in any violence towards the men, just shouting at them. End of story. Wild Eye. Be careful in the parks at night in Vietnam. Dong grabbers, let's not meet again. Gym Stalker. One night I, 18M, was at the gym around 10 p.m. because I worked all day and my gym stays open all night. I was casually working out as I always have. Out of nowhere, this very short Hispanic guy comes out of nowhere and asks me what I'm doing later. Thinking this is very odd, I decided to ignore him and act like I couldn't hear him cause of my headphones. He kept asking me but eventually left. When I finished my workout, I went into the locker room to get my keys and check myself out in the mirror. As I entered the locker room, the guy was sitting on the bench staring at me, like watching my every move. So I skip looking at myself in the mirror and grab my keys and go to the bathroom quick. I can see he starts to follow me as I head to the urinal, so I quickly resort to a stall. When I left the stall, he is still staring from the urinal. I ignore him and start leaving the gym, but he still follows me. Once again he asks me what I'm doing tonight and what my name is, but this time I couldn't pretend to not hear him, so I just said, "Sorry man, I'm not interested," and quickly got to my car and drove away. A week later, I had work again this day, so I was at the gym around 10 p.m. and everything was normal. Was working out, saw some friends, and then I see the same guy from a week ago staring at me whilst laying against an empty wall. I try to ignore him, but every machine or workout I do, he starts to follow me. I stayed by some friends so he would hopefully not come near me. When those friends left, so did he. So I thought I was safe. I get my stuff together and head out around 11:30. At this point my phone had died. I was a little worried, but then I started to freak out because when I approached my car there was a rose in my truck's handle, driver's side. I actually started to run and went back in to get assistance from someone working cause I didn't feel like dying that day. After removing it, I sped home as fast as I could. A few days after, I had a normal workout, didn't see him till I went to my truck. He was parked right next to me, standing in front of his car. While I got in, I could see him watching me the whole time. Now every time I go late at night, he's waiting for me and asking me weird questions. I talked to the workers about this and they said he's not from here and is just trying to be nice. But I can't help but wonder why he doesn't get the hint when I tell him no all the time. I wake up hours early in the morning to go to the gym now. But when I go late, he's still there watching me every time. What should I do? Another time there was a rose on my windshield and a phone wire wrapped around my handle. Hey, race a picture. Then more recently he added me on Snapchat. Ick, how he knows my name or how he knew what car was mine in the first place. Stalked by a client, TW/child abuse. I used to be employed as a child protection worker. A report came through about a stepfather who was being abusive to his children. I was given the investigation by my team leader. When I interviewed the oldest child with the police, she had very visible physical injuries and told me exactly what had happened. I'll spare the details, but it was horrific. As the children were in his sole care, we knew that they needed to be removed immediately. We sent a team of 2 workers out to the children's school while myself and a colleague called the stepfather into the office. I lead the interview and it was horrible. He didn't even try to deny that he had hurt his stepchild. Basically saying, "That's my kid, I'll do what I want and you can't stop me." When I served him with the paperwork, he absolutely lost his mind. He was swearing and screaming and said, "If we were outside this building right now I would effing kill you." We ended up running out of the interview room, pressing our emergency alarm, and I even had to make a police report about the whole thing. It got really messy. The next day we had court for the children and my manager decided I shouldn't attend due to everything that had happened the previous day. My colleague who attended told me that this man was at court and yelled several times. Something to the effect of, "Where is that CT of a worker who took my kids?" I remember feeling a little freaked out, but it's not uncommon to hear things similar to this when you have to remove a child. It's understandable that emotions are very high. You build a bit of a resilience working in this field, and overall I mainly felt relieved that those children had been placed with an aunt and were safe. About 2 weeks later I had to stay back late at the office on an unrelated job. It was about 9 p.m. when I finished and I was the only person there. I walked out the back of the building to my car. It was really dark, but when I got close I thought I saw a shadow moving at the front of my car. Just for a second and then it was gone. I was about 20 meters away at this point, but it startled me. I stood there for a second just looking at my car, wondering if I was just being paranoid. While staring into the darkness I started hearing tiny rustling noises, and whether imagined or not, all of the true crime horror stories I've ever heard flashed into my mind. Safe to say I freaked myself out and sprinted back to the building. I called my boyfriend to come and pick me up, explaining what had happened. By the time he drove up to the front doors I had convinced myself I was being silly and asked him to drive me around to my car. He circled around and with the headlights shining on my car I could very clearly see that all 4 of my tires had been slashed. I was an absolute mess that night and called the police immediately. I was pretty sure that this man was responsible, but as I hadn't seen him I couldn't say for sure. I took a few days off and came back to a meeting with my manager, who had put together a safety plan for me and the other staff. She'd organized to have a security guard escort us to our cars and said very clearly that no one was to stay in the building after hours alone. Then about a week later a letter was delivered to the office addressed to me. Any mail that comes into the office goes through our reception staff. Our lovely receptionist opened it and it was a note that said, "You're as good as dead, bitch." The words were typed and printed. She was an older woman and burst into tears when she read it. It didn't say who had sent it, but I am convinced it was the same man. Over the next few weeks letters kept coming, each one getting longer. They addressed me as bitch and home wrecker, saying that I kidnap and abuse children. It was just horrible, horrible stuff. The threats in the letters were the worst. The person writing them threatened to rape, torture, kill, find out where I live and to burn down the entire building. To be honest, the police were less than helpful. They basically said that given the nature of our work they couldn't conclusively say it was this man, although they had questioned him. To me it all seemed like a pretty massive coincidence. I'd never had anything like this happen before. They did say they were taking the letters very seriously and tracking down where they'd been posted from, but I never heard anything back about that. My workplace took the threats very seriously too. All of the security was bumped up across the building and all staff completed refresher training on emergency management. One day on the way home from work I noticed that a car was following me. At first I thought I was being paranoid, so I drove down a bunch of little streets, double-backed onto the same route in a way that would make absolutely no sense. Even after all that, a dark green Camry was still paced a little way behind me. I freaked out but had already planned in my head what I was going to do in this situation. I headed straight to the police station, planning to pull right up to the front of the building and beat my horn until I had someone's attention. The second I pulled into the police station the green Camry drove straight past and disappeared down a nearby side street. I sat there for a good 20 minutes too scared to get out of the car in case they came back around the corner. It dawned on me that in my panic I'd forgotten to get the license plate. That upsets me to this day. I told the police what I knew, but they told me that the man didn't have any car registered in his name. This was the final straw for me. I was a nervous wreck. I was looking around constantly at work and at home. I knew that he lived relatively close to me, so I even stopped going grocery shopping in case I ran into him. I stayed on stress leave for a month and heard from colleagues that the letters kept arriving. I was very honestly ready to quit, but then COVID happened. It really changed everything. Everyone went into lockdown and all access to the office was restricted. I started back working from home, driving a work car to and from appointments. I didn't go into the office regularly anymore, only allowed in small working groups when absolutely necessary. Over the next year the letters slowed and eventually stopped. By the time we were allowed back in the office there hadn't been any sign of this man for almost 7 months. About a year later I left child protection. I don't know what happened with those children, but my hope is that they are happy and safe with their family, and as for the men who I believe stalked and threatened me for doing my job, let's not meet ever again.